Today I want to share some fascinating evidence that the story of humanity is much more ancient and much more mysterious than we currently understand. All over the world, many of the most famous ancient structures and archaeological sites are filled with unexplained mysteries, some of which are so strange and compelling that they suggest we are missing major chapters from our understanding of history. So in this video I'm going to be discussing 10 of these ancient mysteries, and more specifically, 10 pieces of evidence that at some point in the distant past, highly advanced civilizations may have flourished on Earth, which have since been forgotten and lost to time. And I know that's a bold claim because it flies in the face of everything we've been taught and everything in our history books. But I encourage you to look at these 10 pieces of evidence with an open mind and draw your own conclusions, because I believe that this study of our ancient past has very significant implications for our present. So 13,000 years ago, something happened called the Younger Dryas climate catastrophe. It was most likely caused by an asteroid or a comet impact, and it was essentially a complete planetary reset. There was a massive and sudden 400-foot rise in sea levels. The Earth entered into a deep freeze for more than 1,000 years, and many animal species were driven into extinction.
If we were to have another event like the event that happened 12,800 years ago, I can say with absolute confidence that our civilization would not survive it. It would not survive it. All these great buildings, all this amazing machinery, all this tech, we would be gone.
If humans left the planet 5,000, 10,000 years from now, you're not going to find much to show that we had been here.
So, considering that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, a few thousand years really is nothing, and this really highlights how little we know about our history and how much time there has been for other civilizations before us to potentially have come and gone. I want to start with a place called Gobekli Tepe, because this site is so ancient and so mysterious that it's forcing us to fundamentally rethink our entire understanding of history. Gobekli Tepe is dated to be around 12,000 years old, and just to put that into perspective, that's 7,000 years older than Stonehenge. 7,000 years older than Stonehenge, and yet it's 50 times bigger. Supposedly, the first civilization on Earth was Sumer, located in Mesopotamia. But we are closer in age to the ancient Sumerians than the ancient Sumerians were to this place, which is just mind-blowing to think about. So Gobekli Tepe was constructed at a time long before any civilization existed. We have no idea who built this or why, and supposedly only hunter-gatherers were around at this time. But this site has more than 200 of these big stone pillars weighing 20 to 60 tons each. 60 tons is the equivalent of 7 full-grown elephants that they were moving around here. So you would obviously need a huge and well-organized workforce to construct this. And that raises the question of how did a group of hunter-gatherers accomplish that task? And even more incredibly, Gobekli Tepe is aligned to true north. It's perfectly aligned to true north, which requires highly advanced astronomical knowledge of constellations and significant engineering skill to actually do that. And again, this was built at a time before writing was supposedly invented. So where did these so-called hunter-gatherers get this sophisticated knowledge of astronomy and engineering? For some reason, this site was intentionally buried around 10,000 years ago, and we have no idea why. Why would people create a site of this scale and sophistication and then intentionally bury it? Could this have been an effort of the survivors of the Younger Dryas catastrophe to preserve the knowledge of their people and pass it on to future generations? We've only excavated 5% of this massive site, and for sure it will continue to reveal new insights into the mysteries of our past. The builders of Gobekli Tepe used massive stones weighing up to 60 tons, but compared to what I'm about to show you, that is nothing. Here at a place called Baalbek in Lebanon, we find some of the largest stones ever cut, lifted, and moved. These 3 stones here are referred to as the trilithon, and each one of them weighs almost 1,000 tons. That's 2 million pounds. And yet, somehow, each of these stones was transported uphill from the quarry almost a mile away and lifted more than 30 feet off the ground. For some perspective, this here is a 340-ton stone moved in modern times as an art installation. 340 tons, and to move this stone, we needed this custom-built truck that was almost 300 feet long, and it took 9 days moving it at 6 miles an hour to move this thing 60 miles. And each one of these stones here at Baalbek were 3 times heavier. How the hell was this accomplished? It's just incredible, and it's truly a mystery. What were the methods and the technologies and the techniques used in cutting and moving these stones? This megalithic construction using absolutely massive stones is seen in numerous places around the globe. For example, here are what are called the Colossi of Memnon in ancient Egypt, which were originally carved out of a single piece of stone and weighed around 800 tons each. And get this, they were moved 700 kilometers from their quarry to this site. These are believed to have been too heavy to move up the Nile, so they had to have been carried over land. And again, how was that done? Over in South America, there are many more of these megalithic sites. At one spot called Sacsayhuaman, some of the stones weigh up to 200 tons. That's 100 large SUVs. And they're all interlocking and fit together perfectly. The quarry is located miles away, and we're talking rough, mountainous terrain here. These stones are literally hauled up mountains. I mean, how is this possible? And finally, here at Yangshan Quarry, there is this gigantic rock that was never lifted or moved, but it was cut and it weighs in at a ridiculous 16,000 tons. And the question becomes, why would ancient people using hammers and chisels have insisted on cutting and moving these massive stones if it would have made their job so much more difficult, to the point of being nearly impossible? It's almost as though lifting and moving these hundreds of tons of stone over large distances wasn't really that difficult for them to do. We would struggle to match these abilities today, and even though none of this proves anything yet, it has to make you wonder how ancient people did this. So what I'm about to do is link together numerous of these ancient sites across the world, and what I'm about to describe just might be the most definitive proof of ancient advanced civilizations having once existed on Earth. Many of these ancient sites display similarities and common characteristics which are incredibly specific. And yes, people all over the world built common structures such as pyramids, but I'm talking way more specific than that. So check this out. This is called polygonal masonry, and it's a style of building seen in multiple places around the globe where ancient builders use these irregularly shaped blocks fitting together with amazing precision without the use of mortar. Some of these stones are just ridiculous. This stone, for example, has 12 sides, and some of the stones have more than 30 faces. And yet the fits are so precise and exact that they are often watertight, and these walls are earthquake resistant. Replicating this today with modern technology would still be very difficult. And you have to wonder why, if they're hammering away at this with a chisel, why would they make it so difficult on themselves when there are much simpler and more efficient ways of building a wall? But okay, here's where it gets really mind-blowing. You see these little bumps or notches on these walls? They're found at many different sites all over the world, most notably in South America. They seem to be placed randomly. We really have no idea what they are or what function they served. But check this out. These exact same notches that are seen all over sites in South America are also found here in Egypt on the casing stones of the pyramids, and here in the Assyrian temple, also in Egypt. And are these here the same bumps at Yangshan Quarry in China? Guys, please explain to me how this is possible. Supposedly these structures are the work of vastly different cultures at different times, and yet the connection here is undeniable. To me, this is definitive proof of some sort of link between whoever built these structures dating back thousands of years, when supposedly these people had no means of communication and didn't even know each other existed. But that's not all. Let's travel now to Petra in Jordan, which is another one of these absolutely incredible, beautiful sites. You can see on the walls here that there are these scratching tool marks where the rock has been carved out in this regular pattern of long parallel lines. Now compare that to the tool marks found here back at Baalbek in Lebanon, and compare that to the tool marks found here in China at Yangshu Cave, and here at Yangshan Quarry, and even here at this temple in India. And there are many, many more examples of these similarities and these patterns at different sites across the world, such as these tool marks which seem to be scoops out of the rock found in Egypt and elsewhere, as well as these metal bracings which were used to fit together large stones. So again, how is this possible? The ability to travel or communicate across continents suggests undeniably that some sort of advanced technology was present. Next, I want to highlight some more of these tool marks found at ancient sites across the world that demonstrate this perfect machine-like precision, almost as if these stones were shaped by power tools or some type of lost technology. On a number of sites across the world in Egypt, South America, India, and elsewhere, the craftsmanship and the finish on some of these structures is so perfect and precise that it's really hard to understand how anyone could do this with a hammer and chisel. At a place called the Serapeum in Egypt, there are these 100-ton massive stone boxes carved out of a single piece of rock which have this incredible polished finish. Then there are these mysterious holes which undeniably seem to be drilled by some sort of power tool because they penetrate more than 2 feet through hard granite rock, which we can only cut today with diamond-tipped drills, and there's just no way that a hammer and chisel could achieve this kind of a perfectly bored hole. Some of these blocks of stone found in ancient Egypt have what appear to be circular saw marks. India, too, is filled with many ancient structures and temples that have these mysterious tool marks and such fine finishes that there is no way these could have been created by a hammer and chisel. Take, for example, these columns here, which you can see the tool marks here. These were undeniably turned on a circular lathe, which is a technology that was supposedly beyond the capabilities of the builders at that time, especially considering that these are massive columns. Now, the fifth piece of evidence here is what I refer to as layered technology, where at some of these ancient sites, you can see different layers of building, different styles of building, where the more recent people have built upon older work. For example, here at Machu Picchu, you can clearly see 2 different building styles, 2 different technologies used at 2 different times. You can also see the same here in Cusco, and the same here at the Osirian in Egypt. And yet what's so interesting about this is that the lower, older levels are clearly way more advanced and way more refined and have way better craftsmanship. Why is that? What happened to the knowledge and techniques needed to create this versus this? My own personal belief is that, for example, at Machu Picchu, the Incan people found this site, which may have already existed for who knows how long, saw it as a sacred site and claimed it as their own, inhabited it, and built on top of it. Now I want to travel to Egypt for a second and talk about the Sphinx. Geologists John Anthony West and Robert Schoch have put forth astonishing research presenting undeniable evidence of water erosion around the Sphinx. Now, why is this significant? Mainstream archaeologists believe that the Sphinx was constructed by the Egyptians 4,500 years ago, but for this type of water erosion to have occurred here in Egypt, geologists estimate that the Sphinx must have been there for at least 10,000 years.
What I was seeing, I was convinced, was precipitation weathering and erosion from rainfall, from water beating down on it. Now, how do you have that when it's been Sahara Desert for 5,000 or more years? So immediately I saw this anomaly. I'm convinced at this point, for a number of technical reasons, that actually the seismic data suggests that we have to go back to at least around 10,000 BC.
Now, to move close by to the pyramids of Giza, there is a lot to be said here, obviously, but I'll try to keep it brief. The sophistication and the precision of these structures is just so completely mind-blowing. The Great Pyramid weighs in around 6 million tons and has a footprint of 13 acres. In its construction, there are 70-ton blocks of granite which were raised more than 300 feet. Yet despite being so massive, it's also incredibly precise. It's aligned to true north within 1/20th of a single degree. The geometry of these pyramids corresponds with astronomical knowledge and understandings of the Earth's geography in a way that is so accurate that supposedly this was not possible at the time they were built. And it's interesting to note that there is not one single hieroglyph found anywhere in Egypt about the constructions or about the massive undertaking that it must have been to build these structures over many years. Not one hieroglyph or written record anywhere. Mainstream archaeologists insist that these structures were built as a tomb, but honestly, we have no idea what the true purpose was of these pyramids. In my opinion, this is clearly not a tomb. This is something much stranger and much more sophisticated than that. The pyramids of Giza are one of the most mysterious archaeological sites, but there are thousands of ancient structures all over the world which we don't understand. We can't explain how or why they were built. For example, in a number of places across the globe, there are these false doors etched into the stone, which are so fascinating to me. And this one here in Peru is particularly impressive because, I mean, just look at it. It's almost as if it's laser cut with these perfect 90-degree angles. If this was done with a hammer and chisel to this level of perfection, then surely it would have taken forever. And in that case, what was its purpose? It's found in the middle of nowhere on a mountain. Why would someone invest so much time into this? And what about this random carving here next to it, which also seems to be without a clear purpose? These same questions can be posed for these other false doors found carved into the rock in other places around the world. I also want to mention the Nazca lines. There is plenty of speculation and controversy around the Nazca lines, how they were constructed and why. And not only that, but at the same site, at these Nazca lines, you have these massive etchings into the ground where it's almost like entire mountaintops were flattened and removed. And again, you have to ask yourself, why was this done? Why would these ancient builders have done this? Just as there are strange archaeological sites, there have also been found many thousands of so-called out-of-place artifacts, which seem to display a knowledge or a level of technological advancement which is just inexplicable for the time they were supposedly made. Now, there are many of these out-of-place artifacts, but I just want to mention a few so you can research them more yourselves. This is the controversial ancient Sumerian seal, which demonstrates knowledge of our solar system many thousands of years before Copernicus determined that the Earth orbits the Sun. Then there are these Kimbaya airplanes found in Colombia, which seem to clearly represent flying machines. And in Mexico, there is a huge number of ancient Mayan artifacts which bizarrely seem to display UFO or extraterrestrial contact. Just to mention a few more of these out-of-place artifacts, we have the Dorchester pot, the Sayhuite stone, the Piri Reis map, the Dendera light, and the Star Child skull. All of these really challenge our understanding of the chronology of human history. And number 10, there have also been many unusual discoveries of human skeletal remains which date back to extremely ancient geological periods. In his book, Forbidden Archaeology, Michael Cremo documents hundreds of these cases which suggest that anatomically modern humans were present on Earth long before we currently believe.
What I've shown in my work is that there are hundreds of these cases where archaeologists, geologists, and other scientists who are digging into the Earth have found human bones, human artifacts, and human footprints that go far further back in time than the now dominant consensus allows.
For example, we have the Laetoli footprints found in solidified volcanic ash, which is 3,700,000 years old. The Castandolo bones were found in a geological layer which would give this skull an age of 3 to 4 million years old. And similarly, we have the Buenos Aires skull, where workers in Argentina unearthed a human skull, allegedly which dated to 1.5 million years old. Okay guys, well there it is. I've thrown a lot of information at you today, and this is probably my longest video yet, but I'm really curious to hear your thoughts about all of this and whether or not you find this compelling. Personally, I am now convinced that all the evidence adds up to a very clear conclusion, that we are missing major chapters in the story of human history. I believe that we are approaching a paradigm shift here. We're at a time now as a species where we are opening up to a broader awareness, a bigger picture understanding of our place in the cosmos. And I see this study of ancient history as a key puzzle piece in that process. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. If you would like to support this channel, I've just set up a Patreon account, which is linked below. I am so grateful to all of you, and I will see you back here very soon.